Hi, everybody. We're using a new technology for those of you who are watching. So I've abandoned Be Live for all the audio issues. I've purchased Zoom. We're using the Zoom Live through Facebook that my friend Tiffany introduced me to. My friend Katie is here. So hopefully this is getting published. And if you can, I believe I can see the comments as well. So feel free to comment, ask questions, participate, whatever. We're happy to be here. So a bit about branding. Hi, Katie.
Hello, Jesse and everybody.
This is Katie's first live video, so that's very exciting too.
Yes, we're all trying new things.
So, Katie, you own a number of companies, but why don't you do a quick introduction about you and what brought you to branding and why you're an expert on it and why we're chatting about it today?
Sure. So my name is Katie Burkhart. I am the founder of what is now called Matter 7, which is a boutique branding firm based here in Boston. We work specifically with purpose-driven or mission-driven organizations as often or as exclusively as possible, which has been a really exciting experience for me. My background actually comes out of theater design and literature and writing, creative writing, which brings a really interesting perspective that combines my collaboration skills, my storytelling skills, the ability to look at, theater is this amazing art form where you have a whole bunch of different people responsible for a very small aspect of one greater whole that for all the people in the audience looks like one person did it, but in fact it was a whole bunch of people. So I love looking at a brand and being able to figure out how all the pieces are going to come together. So that's been a great experience for me, as well as the, creative storytelling aspect of, how do we tell this specific story? And I'm actually working on an article about my design philosophy. And one of the things in there, it talks about, arguing the reason and really being able to say, this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is how it's specific to you.
Cool. And so Katie runs a branding company called, outside of herself, she runs a writing company called Matter 7. And one of the things that what you guys focus on is doing purpose-driven branding. So working with companies that have a higher purpose to them, which I really think is awesome. And your design is beautiful. So that's why I wanted to chat today. Yay.
Thank you.
This is cool. So far, so good. I'm hoping everybody can hear us. I think we've got a few people watching. So I'm still trying to figure out the process. I think I can see comments, but we'll see as we go along. So just that's why I keep looking between the screens. There's the Zoom screen and then there's the Facebook feed and, keeping it interesting in these crazy times. So let's start talking about brand first. When in prep for this conversation, you and I talked a lot about, why branding matters now. So in terms of the relevance and what's going on, we've seen a lot of interesting ways that brands are reacting in the market. Keeping the idea of actionable marketing top of mind as we chat, because the folks listening are, tea companies or small companies or solopreneurs. We're trying to provide tips and tricks to them. So outside of, larger thoughts, if there's, they're looking for those nuggets, so golden nuggets of information to help them expand their businesses. So, all right. So we're talking about brand. We'll do it one question at a time. And if it doesn't work again, we'll record it and I'll post it later. So
sounds good to me.
Okay.
So the question was, what's going on with branding now? And I would say what I'm seeing both in what I'm reading, and I read a lot, and what I'm experiencing with actual clients is sort of two approaches. Either the organization is getting scared, for lack of a better word. They're not sure what's going to happen. They're not quite sure what to do. They're very worried about money. And they're basically retracting and saying, we don't want to put money into any of these things. We want to pull way, way back. Or they're saying, what, we recognize that, one of the areas we actually don't want to reduce is something that's generating awareness, that's making sure that people know that we're here and that we're either reaching new people or just keeping the people that we have engaged with us so that when we come out of this, hopefully we're we're stronger for it. And I would say that, my point of view is generally to go with the latter and say, right now is a great opportunity to actually brand build from an awareness and loyalty perspective. You have a great opportunity to go out and, show support for the people in your community, whether they're prospective buyers, actual buyers, donors, prospective donors, the people that you're actually, the community that you're actually trying to help, whomever that is, as well as your internal team. We're all looking for things to be a part of. Work is a productive, fulfilling thing for quite a lot of people. So it's definitely a time to use your brand as something to be engaged in and around. But I think from an actionable marketing point of view, one of the things that has been sort of killing me as I'm getting bombarded with emails, et cetera, is like, think about that response in a brand aligned capacity. Like if you are not actually a remote work expert, please do not jump on the remote work train. Like I get it. I know that we all need to learn how to do it and like get these skills. But if that's not really aligned with your brand, if that's not really a skill set you have, pick something else that would help you. One of the companies that I think is doing an excellent job with this is Eventbrite, who has really done, I think, a stellar job of being human in their communications, brand aligned in their communications, but genuinely and tangibly supportive to the community of event creators that uses their software. So I've actually been like looking to them for inspiration myself to be like, what types of messages are you sending out? What policies are you putting in place? Like, what are you doing that is going to really help people come back to your platform and be like, this is one that I want to stay connected to because they help me figure out what I'm going to do right now.
Yeah,
without necessarily asking for anything in return.
That's a great example. Eventbrite, for those of you who don't know, is a ticketing. You can plan events and charge tickets, and they make it really easy to do donations to events and things like that as well.
It's a great platform. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. Kevin, who was our SEO guy, and I have been chatting as we've been trying to re-record our live session, we were talking about brands that and their tone of voice and how they're conversing. And one of the ones that I brought up, and I'll bring it up here because I think it's timely, is a local restaurant in my town that does, their emails are hysterical. And if you've talked to me, you've probably heard me talk about him because his voice and his authenticity behind, how he communicates and shares. I should have brought one up so I could share it with you guys now, but they're giving out, like, think creatively about how you want to communicate your brand and be authentic to what you have to offer. So he's a restaurant, he's making it easy to pick up food. And, when you go, you have to put, you make a sign, you put it in the window with your name and your order on it, but he's enticing people by giving away free toilet paper, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
And his emails and his tone, and you can feel his energy through it. So, keeping that in mind too, as you're talking about it, don't lose sight of how you're communicating, and tone and manner in terms of the way that you express yourself is incredibly important. Let's talk a little bit about, brand guidelines and the importance of putting those together. Even as a one-person company, I've done it for myself to make sure I stay consistent. Can you talk about your experience with brand guidelines, what that means, and kind of walk through that a little bit? It's your favorite. It's your favorite thing.
I'm an organized person, so to me, this is like where organization comes into my life. I would say that I look at this as somebody who is both a brander, meaning I create brands for other people, but I'm also a founder of more than one company, and I've had to build my own brands. And I would say that, one of the biggest, not mistakes, but like things that I might have done differently when I talk to people is like actually developing your own brand is really difficult. And if I make the third company that I have in the back of my mind, one of the things I'm not going to do is brand it because it's actually really difficult to do. But it's especially difficult if you don't follow your own advice. And I just went through a rebrand for my firm, and we actually have proper brand guidelines, and everything's up and labeled, and things are documented the way that they should be. And the way that I like to look at guidelines, and people look at them differently, is I think that there's been a really nice move away from these like 100-page, ludicrously detailed, down to the centimeter of like how far the logo comes in from the side of the page, guidelines to things that are much more minimal and things that have been digitized. And I've actually started to use a platform called Brand Docs more regularly, which is actually really affordable. It's built by a Swedish marketing team who decided that this was a problem clients were having, so they went out and built their own solution, like hoorah.
Cool.
And it's been great to sit and actually integrate how are you supposed to use these things with the files themselves so that it's really seamless for people to have access and figure out what to do. And I would definitely say that, like, if this is a time at your company or your business or even your nonprofit where you're like, okay, we aren't, marketing that really big event we had planned, we aren't doing some of the things we originally had planned, this is a great time to be sitting and saying, hey, let me get my brand stuff cleaned up. Let me make sure that this is documented the way that I want to see it. Let me go out and fix those couple of inconsistencies where I've got old branding or we never branded whatever it was because nobody had the time, and try to get those things cleaned up so that, when, you're ready to hit the ground running coming out of this, with that in better shape. But the advice I like to give people when they're thinking about like what to document and how to document it is consistent but flexible. You want to make sure, and I'm a big believer that good brand building hinges on consistency. However, you want to make sure that there's enough room to be flexible to tell your story everywhere it needs to be told, in every format it needs to be told, to every type of person that needs to hear it. So making it so rigid that you can't breathe makes it very difficult to actually produce material, stories, marketing collateral, whatever it is that you're doing. But really looking at those key pieces that are really fundamental to your mission, vision, values, and purpose, at least from my point of view, are the things that are the most important to have out there and keep consistent and leave some room for things that, can have some flexibility depending on where they're going.
So when we talk about brand guidelines, just to be really specific for folks listening, we're talking about what are the main colors that you use in your brand? What are the fonts that you use regularly when you represent your brand in creative pieces? That could be when you're building stuff on Canva or when you're building stuff with a designer. How do you leverage your logo? Do you have a black and white version? Do you have a white version? And do you have a full color version? So in addition to that, what's your tagline of your business? Katie mentioned mission, vision, values, which is important. So what's the mission of your business? What are the values that you're trying to bring to your business? And what are the values that you have as tenants within your business as well? So writing those down in PowerPoint and some sort of format, and even hanging them up on the wall in some cases can be really valuable. And, it's one of the things that I know, Katie, you and I have talked a lot about this with some of the businesses you're doing, but even with my own practices, I've gotten off the ground. I sat down and wrote them out for myself, and it's really, really hard. I've done it for a number of clients as well. And they can also change sometimes too, as your vision changes, as your motivation changes. I know we're all in a state of change right now, as we're figuring out how to further our businesses and change our businesses. And maybe you shift it for a little while and say, okay, right now my vision was this, and for the next 6 months, I'm going to focus on this. So any other thoughts on that? It's pretty straightforward, I think.
Yeah, I know that there are oodles of, if you go out to Google or Pinterest or anything else, there's lots of like, here's your template, fill in the blanks types of things. So if you're like struggling figuring out how to get started and what am I supposed to write down and whatnot, if you're struggling to figure out like, I've never really, like, I sort of have a logo, I kind of have colors, but I figure it out from there. One of the things that you can do is like find a trusted colleague or a friend who's going to give it to you straight as a way to not have them develop your brand for you. They may or may not have that skill set, but they can give you accurate perspective on yourself. And one of the things that I encourage people to do, which, especially if you're looking at personal branding or really small business branding, is people can get very into, what are my qualities and who am I as a person, but they forget that sort of end part of that statement, which is, and what do I bring to the table that's valuable to my customer or my community? And sometimes the best way to get that answer is actually to ask other people. And it was something I did for my own branding with a colleague that I was like, thank God that I sat and like asked somebody else to be like, and went back to some of my clients and went back through some emails. And it was like, when people compliment things and people say thank you for stuff, what are they hitting on? What are the themes there? And then how do I marry who I am with what's being seen as valuable?
Totally. That's actually a really great tip. And I think it's one of the things with my own brand that I looked at. I looked at my recommendations on LinkedIn. I was like, what are the things that people are pointing out that I'm good at? And I could see some patterns in that. And I think with, we're both providing services rather than products. But even if you look at your testimonials, I think going through your testimonials, seeing if there's consistent words that people are using, those are the things that people are relating to you and should be part of your brand. It's an incredibly useful piece of advice. And it's a great time it's a great time to be doing some of that and reflective work. I think I have a couple of simple templates that I've put together that I've used with clients. I'll be happy to share them to the group as well. I'll post them later, probably in the next couple of days to see, and see if maybe they'd be helpful for folks as well. So cool. We talked, I have my list of Katie questions here. So we talked about developing a brand, brand guidelines, why we should care about brand right now. We talked a little bit about tone and manner. Let's talk about some brands that off the top of your head, brands that you think do a really good job, and don't pick the traditional ones. Like, I don't want to hear you say Apple. I don't want you to hear to say Coke. You're not allowed to say Pepsi, but a brand that came up in conversation yesterday that I think has done a really great job in terms of embracing what's going on. Their tone was spot on. I actually recognize them for a TV commercial, which I don't always have immediate recognition of. Angel Soft toilet paper, I think, is doing an incredible job right now. They had a TV commercial, which, again, I'm a big streamer, so I don't know, I must have been watching something that I saw them on live TV, but their message was on point. I'm not even a buyer of Angel Soft, so we're a Scott Sharman household. I'm a big fan of those. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but the big forever rolls, they're like super huge. They're supposed to last you a month. It's great product, Charmin. But the Angel Soft commercial that popped up was, they show you, we're here for you. They could have gone really funny with it. It's a funny topic. But the tone of it was just like very subtle and on point. And I think, their name is Angel Soft. They're thinking about their tone and how they perceive themselves and how that's incorporated into their branding. I thought they had done a really good job with the commercial. The sentiment was, here's what we're doing at our offices to make sure that you're able to keep things clean. That wasn't their catchphrase. It was something less funny. But it was like, we're here for you. We're here for you and your families. And I like the fact that I've remembered it, and it must have been a week ago. I mean, they're doing something right. So, what have you come up with? What do you got?
I would say that, like, from a COVID, virus being responsive perspective, Eventbrite still sort of tops my list as far as what they're doing, how they're getting it out there. I'm somebody who, I'm a self-proclaimed doer. So, like, I don't have a whole lot of space in my world for, like, just nice thoughts and feelings. So what I like about what they're doing is there's a little nice thought and feeling, and then there's like, here are resources we're putting together, here's stuff that you can take away, here are policies and things that we've changed to try to make your life better. That speaks to me because that's my personality. Not looking so much at, like, right now times. One of the brands that actually popped to mind, which is not a brand I actually purchased, but I was really impressed by, like, how well they had thought through the whole process and how they were doing everything, is the bra company Third Love. I really loved their visual design. I really liked their messaging. I liked how they handled sending me the product, the whole process to pick my product, what I got in packaging, how, how the return process went, like, how the story was set up, like, pretty much every touch point was incredibly well aligned, was authentic without feeling sugar coated. It just had a great cadence all the way through. And like I said, I didn't end up buying the product, which had nothing to do with their branding. I just didn't like the bra. But I was really impressed with, like, and it stuck with me because that was like 2 years ago, that I was like, this is a really, like, whatever company did this, whoever did this, like, clearly thought brand through beyond, like, don't we have a beautiful logo, and really took the time to try to integrate that really consistently across their entire life cycle and all of your customer touch points, which I was personally really impressed by, and would say that if you have time to, like, go through at least some of the process, there's some really good stuff there. Trying to think of who else pops to mind that I'm, like, always impressed with their branding.
It's a hard question because you think about the products you use regularly and you're like, but if you think about, looking around the room right now, I'm like, what's in here that I use regularly? And I tend to support a lot of small businesses. So I'm looking around the room, looking at all the small business stuff I have lurking over here. But, I think the big things that we've talked about today, just kind of summarize things up, are around, being consistent. So, and I know people will say that often, but really taking the time, even if it's an hour, sit down and, write down, who do you want to be? What are the colors and the fonts that you're using regularly? Mission, vision, values is important, and reevaluating those, I'd say recommended. Again, I'm going out on my own consultancy. I'm looking at those regularly, but as an established business, maybe every 6 months, just kind of sanity checking. Companies I've worked at, I've literally printed them out and put them up on the wall, for companies that I've worked for too. Any other tips there is, people are evaluating their brands and thinking through what they're doing, not specifically logos per se, but it's more than that.
So what we call this at our firm is the core: your purpose, vision, mission, values, and brand story. The core that should be, very much like a Star Trek engine core, should be running your whole organization. It should be touching everything. It should be powering everything. You should be able to tie back to it with everything that you're doing if you're doing it effectively. And I really strongly recommend that if it's something that's new, definitely check in on it more regularly. If it's something where like you're established, you feel pretty good about these things, like even annually, like someone does need to sit down, take a look at it, and then take a look at the whole organization and be like, are we living up to this? And where did we creep? People, nonprofits have what's called mission creep. It's a term for a reason. It's because they're not necessarily doing anything bad. In fact, usually it comes from a compulsion to do something good, but whatever they're doing does not actually have anything to do with their stated mission. It's actually something else. And in some cases, that starts to lead to a level of diversification that actually makes it harder for them to achieve their stated mission because they're spreading themselves too thin. So it's from a strategic point.
Not to interrupt you, but do you feel like at that point though, outside of the creep that happens, and it's all business, is that an opportunity to adjust what the mission, vision, values should be? Or do you find that people need to realign? Like what's your, I guess it depends on the stage of business that you're in, but I'm curious on your thoughts on how you've seen that react within businesses.
I would say both. I've been part of organizations where it's like, hey, we've actually determined that what we thought was really going to be the need, we were wrong. We were a little too far to the left or a little too far to the right. We ended up identifying this and determined that we needed to evolve. And I have one group where I helped them through a pivot where they determined that they actually wanted to specify, and by virtue of specifying, they had to get rid of some other stuff that they were doing because they had become so general that they weren't really able to make any measurable, like they were doing stuff, but they weren't making measurable impact towards any specific goal because they'd become generalists. Not evil, not wrong, not bad, but not great. And now that they've been really specific and they're continuing to specify as they move forward, it's allowed them to, and we're actually working with them to set up really clear goals and metrics that tie into what their impact's supposed to be so that they can actually go back to donors and sponsors and even members and say like, hey, this is what your dollar did based on what it is we're trying to do. Conversely, I have worked with groups where we realized, going down the road, it wasn't so much that what we thought was different. It was an awareness that we started with something really specific and we were able to widen the scope a bit without really leaving, what it was that we set out to do. And I would say that it's different for every organization and every business, and you have to really take time to think strategically about it. And to me, it's why it's so important to have that purpose. Why are we here and why do we matter? Because I think that why allows you to better assess this is cool and this is doing good in the world, but it's not the good we set out to do in the world. So we need to find another place for that versus, trying to do every good in the world. This goes back to the, oh my God, what's his face? With the minimally viable market. He's a marketer. He's really well known.
I know. I can't think of his name.
Seth Godin, who says that it's the minimally viable market. And he says that, and it's great advice. And I'm a big one for concentrating your efforts rather than having so much going on. And what he basically says is the best marketing is for a company that sells a very specific thing to a very specific community. And he's absolutely right. One of the hardest, and Jesse, you may back this up or not, but one of the hardest brands, one of the hardest marketing campaigns to run is where you're trying to sell something to everybody. It's impossible to make messaging. It's impossible to differentiate. It's usually boring as crap. The best marketing is when you're selling something specific to a specific person that preferably needs it, but can just want it.
Totally.
So usually I'm an advocate for like, put that core together, know why you're here and what you're trying to do, and do that. It doesn't mean you won't evolve, or new technology won't be introduced, or you won't innovate something. Like, absolutely don't feel like you're stuck in a rut. But definitely thinking about, is this us? Is this what we should be doing? Or is this something that somebody else should be doing? And one of the cool things about purpose-driven organizations is that they are collaborative in nature. So what you may find is that this thing is really important to us, but we're not the right people to do it. So we're going to partner with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a way for us to support that and see that good thing happen.
I think too, we haven't talked about this in this chat, but the idea of target audience. And so it's something that I will use the word preach quite frequently. If you're going to be marketing something, you need to know who you're marketing to. I can market anything to anybody. I just need to know who I'm talking to. And that ties back to brand.
Yep.
But I think that's a conversation for another day. So, but thank you so much for chatting today. Again, I'm like, without technical difficulties, eventually I'll figure this out. Someday. It's part of the fun of learning. So I hope you all are enjoying watching the struggle. But if you want to chat with Katie further, feel free to visit Katie's website. It's katieburkhart.me.
Me. Yep.
Okay. Burkhart. So I'll post a link later on. So thank you so much for chatting.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.